April 21st, 2014, Salt Lake City, Utah. Siale Angilau. Siale Angilau, age 25, sat at the defense table inside a federal courtroom. He was on trial for racketeering charges tied to gang activity. The room was orderly, quiet. A jury was present. Proceedings were underway. It was mid-morning. Angilau had been listening as witnesses testified. The courtroom lighting was bright but sterile. Rows of benches held observers. U.S. Marshals stood nearby, positioned carefully but unobtrusively. There had been no major disturbances up to that point. Then, without warning, Angilau stood. He turned sharply toward his attorney's table. Within seconds, he reached for a pen. Ordinary, small, easily overlooked, but he gripped it tightly and lunged toward a witness who was seated nearby. The movement was sudden, aggressive. To those in the room, it unfolded in fragments, chairs scraping, voices rising, bodies shifting. A U.S. Marshal reacted instantly. He fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. Angilau fell to the floor. The pen dropped beside him. Medical personnel responded quickly, but the wound was fatal. The courtroom was evacuated. Shock settled over everyone present. Jurors, attorneys, and spectators were left trying to process what had happened in seconds. An internal review later concluded the marshal acted within protocol, responding to an immediate threat. The pen, while simple, had been used in a direct attempt to harm. The trial ended abruptly, and what began as a structured legal proceeding turned into a fatal confrontation. In a place built on order and control, a single moment unraveled everything. November 30th, 2017, Nikopol, Ukraine. Oleksandr, defendant in grenade incident. Oleksandr, a defendant in a local criminal case, stood inside a courtroom in Nikopol, Ukraine. He was facing charges related to a violent dispute. The hearing was routine, attended by officials, family members, and a small number of observers. It was early afternoon. The room was modest. Wooden benches lined the walls. Windows let in cold daylight. Outside, the air was still. Inside, proceedings moved steadily, without urgency. But tension had been building. Witnesses described prior conflicts. Emotions ran beneath the surface, quiet but present. There were signs, strained faces, restless movements, but nothing that suggested immediate danger. Then, without warning, Oleksandr reached into his clothing. He pulled out a grenade. There was no time to react. The explosion was immediate and devastating. The blast tore through the confined space, shattering glass and sending debris across the room. When the smoke cleared, Oleksandr was dead. Several others were injured, some critically. Emergency services arrived quickly, securing the area and evacuating survivors. The courtroom was left damaged, scattered with fragments of wood and metal. Investigators later confirmed the grenade had been smuggled in, bypassing security checks. The motive appeared tied to desperation and escalating personal conflict. The hearing never resumed, and those who survived were left with the memory of a moment that turned ordinary into irreversible. In the quiet rhythm of a courtroom, the smallest lapse can become the loudest ending. August 1st, 2017, Moscow, Russia. GTA Gang. Defendants. The elevator inside the Moscow City Court building was small, enclosed, and guarded. 5 defendants, members of what the media called the GTA Gang, were being transported. They were accused of a series of brutal highway murders. It was mid-afternoon. The corridors were busy, but routine. Guards escorted the men, handcuffed, contained. Then, inside the elevator, something shifted. The defendants attacked. Details later suggested they overpowered guards, attempting to seize weapons. The confined space made everything immediate. There was no room to retreat, no space to negotiate. Gunfire erupted. Loud, repeated, echoing through the elevator shaft and into the surrounding floors. When the doors opened, chaos followed. Several of the defendants lay on the ground, critically wounded. Others were injured. Guards were also hurt in the struggle. 3 of the accused died from gunshot wounds. The investigation concluded that the defendants had attempted an escape. The guards had responded with lethal force. Security protocols were scrutinized afterward. How had multiple restrained individuals coordinated such an attack? But the answers were secondary, because the trial never reached its conclusion for those who died. Their stories ended not with sentencing, but in a confined space, between floors, where control vanished in seconds, and where the final moments were defined not by justice, but by survival.